Yes, I have 5.5 miles of the international boundary, and it's a 4-strand barbed wire fence.
Of which you have a replica of here at your booth.
Right, and this 4-strand barbed wire fence is the international boundary, and I have to maintain the international boundary. The government does not do it. I have a self-interest in trying to keep cattle from Mexico out of my ranch.
And keep your cattle in, I assume.
And keep my cattle in. We have good neighbors on the other side, but it's a huge problem for me. But more importantly, it's a national security problem. We have all kinds of film of guys coming through our ranch, and how many of them are ISIS guys? There's been huge numbers come through from other countries. Some of them are countries that are Iran, Iraq, Pakistan. How many of them are ISIS? How many got through? What are their plans?
You had a great point. My perception was that these were illegal immigrants trying to get the United States to live here, to work here, to have a better life. But you made the comment that the vast majority of these coming in are actually moving drugs through your ranch.
That's right. The Sinaloa cartel controls our ranch. They have cartel scouts on the mountains, and they charge people to come through. $3,000 for Mexicans, $7,000 for Middle Americans, Honduras, Guatemala, etc. $25,000 for Chinese or Orientals. And they control everything that comes through, maybe 200 trails on my ranch. And they control it mainly to keep their drug routes open, to bring drugs into people in the United States who decide to smoke or swallow the drugs. So the real problem is the people in the United States who takes the drugs.
The demand for it.
The demand for it.
Why don't you explain some of the things that you have in your booth? The gallon jugs, I assume, for water, and these goofy looking shoes.
Well, they come in with water because there's a lack of water in the desert. 2,600 people have died since 1999 on our ranch and mainly west of us. And so they bring in water, and if they get lost, they can't find water to replace their gallon jugs. And I try to help out by putting water fountains on my 22 wells so that people can get a drink and go through. I don't care whether they're drug packers or
they're human beings.
They're human beings. So it's a humanitarian problem as much as anything. I mean, 2,600 people die since 1999 in our deserts. I mean, that's absolutely horrific. And they, it's uncounted how many almost died, how many broken legs, broken ankles. If you're with a group of 18 or 20 coming through and you sprain your ankle, they leave you. We have had women get left, and one gal fell, broke her arm or her leg, and 4 guys came down into a wash to help her. No, they didn't help her. They took all of her jewelry and all of her money. And it took her 3 days to crawl out to a road, and we just covered in a bar pit. I mean, just the most horrible things we have here in the booth. A photo of a lady and her husband. They were apprehended after 3 days of travel, and they were with a group of 18 guys, and all 18 raped her every night for 3 nights in a row and forced the husband to watch. I mean, these are really nasty, nasty people who do things like that. Now, immigrants coming in, most of them are good folks just looking for work. And we need some sort of way to get them in legally. But we need to seal the border with Trump's wall in order to prevent people coming in for national security reasons, for humanitarian reasons. If the Border Patrol didn't let anybody in, we wouldn't have had 2,600 die.
My first thought is, well, I'm from southern Minnesota, and drones have gotten very popular, and we can see my farm, and every neighbor can see farms. Yeah. Don't we have the technology, maybe without a fence, to just send these drones up? Don't we have the technology then to be able to find these and stop it?
Yes, we do. And we can use drones, but the Border Patrol on parts of our ranch is located 80 miles from the spot where the drone could see it. And so they only come out halfway. They call it a strategy of defense in depth. As a consequence, they can see people coming across if they have a drone. But the question is how do they get there? And from what point in time when the drone spots them, they move and they're 25 or 5 or 10 miles from that spot.
So why don't we build more stations to stage this from? We maybe know where the trails are. We can see if they start to build a new trail. Don't we have the National Guard if the Border Patrol can't do it?
We do. What we need is Trump to finish the wall. And secondly, we need to move the Border Patrol from Tucson out to the international boundary. Anybody climbs over the wall, we have enough people, 27 people per mile, and they can stop it. And it's kind of like a football team. If you're on defense, does everybody line up 10 yards inside of the line of scrimmage? No, they go to the line of scrimmage. The problem is it comes out policy out of Washington, D.C. They call it defense in depth. So the Border Patrol in the Tucson station has 4,000 square miles to defend, yet they have 27 people per mile if they were at the international boundary. Any football coach wouldn't line up everybody way behind the...
How do you take care of your cattle and do what cattle ranchers need to do in this environment? Are you able to take care of your cattle? Do they destroy your property other than walking through it or harm your cattle?
We have a problem with them cutting fences and our cattle getting out of the right pastures. But with the cartel scouts on our mountains, we believe that as we ride through the country to check our fences or to look at our cattle or to gather our cattle in a roundup, we believe that the cartel scouts are diverting their people around us. So maybe the cartel scouts on the mountains are good.
Why don't you explain these shoes again, how the Border Patrol can't track anybody anymore?
Yeah, the Border Patrol used to believe, and it's in fact, they could track people coming across. They were the best trackers in the world. But now they wear the shoes, the people from Mexico wear the shoes that are called carpet shoes, and they put them on their feet and they have carpet on the bottom. The result is they don't leave significant tracks, and they all step in the same spot, and so the Border Patrol has no idea, even if they see a track, how many people there are. So they no longer do the tracking they used to do. Technology prevails.
You have a big picture in the back of your display here, the end of the Nogales City Wall, 2 miles west of town. Why did the wall stop right there?
When Secretary Napalo came into office as head of Homeland Security, she said, we're going to stop building the wall that was authorized in 2006, and because if you have 18-foot wall, people just get a 19-foot ladder and crawl over it. And that's a problem, because if the Border Patrol was at a wall, they could see anybody climbing over the wall.
It'd take time, it'd slow them down, wouldn't it?
It'd catch them all. If you have 27 people per mile, you could see everything happening along the border. But the Border Patrol needs to be at the international boundary rather than 80 miles in a fat, cushy job in Tucson.
Jim, I assume that you grew up on this ranch, or you're second, third generation. So how is it now compared to how it was? Is this something that's always been an issue, or has it gotten worse, gotten better?
Well, my ancestors drove cattle from Texas to Arizona in 1885. I'm a fifth-generation rancher, and when my wife and I bought the ranch on the international boundary, it wasn't a problem. But during the 90s, mid-90s, 2000, I would suspect maybe 50,000 people started walking through my ranch. So the problem was created after we bought the ranch. And so now we're just living with it with our guns.
That was what popped in my head. Do you have fear for your life, or something might happen to you or your family? Or if they're walking through your ranch, if you just leave them alone, they'll leave you alone?
Well, we leave them alone. However, we do have fear. One of our friends, Rob Krentz, was killed the day after his brother reported a load. Larry Link was killed the day after he reported a load. And when I found loads, I quietly report it and stay hid for 2 or 3 months afterwards. It's really bad. We've seen guys coming across with AK-47s. It's serious. I sleep with a shotgun next to my bed. I have a Mini 14 in my front room. Anybody knocks on the door and I go to the door with my Mini 14. I've had as many as 17 drug packers in my front yard and on my porch. And I go out with my rifle and yell, "Hola, agua, agua," and it's usually "si, si." And so I back around with my gun so that I don't have anybody to my back, and I turn on a hose and let them drink and fill up their water bottle and go on.
So a lot of the problem now wouldn't be a problem if it wouldn't be for the demand for drugs in the United States. That's what I'm reading from our conversation right now.
That's true. The drug lords in Mexico, the Sinaloa cartel, is the one that's making a huge profit out of the trails coming through our ranch, bringing drugs in the United States. And if people didn't buy the drugs and sniff them or swallow them or whatever they do, we wouldn't have the drug problem. And we need a legal way to get people into the United States who just want to work. And the big problem is in 1968, President Johnson and the Congress bowed to the AFL-CIO, who demanded an end of the Bracero program. The Bracero program allowed people to come into the United States and work and go back. A farmer in the Great Central Valley of California would indicate to a local office in the United States they needed 100 pickers, say, of apricots. And a telegram would go down to Mexico, and it's like a union hall. And 100 guys would get on a bus. Everything was legal. They had legal papers. They would ride the bus to the Central Valley. They'd work. If grandma got ill, they could get on the bus, go back to Mexico, see grandma. They could come back legally. We need a legal program to get important workers to help us out in our fields and our barns.
Well, I remember when I was growing up, just beginning to help Dad, we kind of got behind, and that's back when we walked beans and pulled the weeds before we had as many herbicides as we do now. And there were ads in papers and media, and it was migrant workers, and they were from Mexico. And the whole family would come in, and whoever was kind of in charge, he'd look at the field and he'd see how many weeds, and he'd say, this many dollars, they would get all the weeds out of the field. And that whole family would work there. They worked hard. And you didn't have to watch them. When they were done, you paid them. And they apparently were happy because their life was better working, pulling weeds in my field than it was back home.
That's right. But they went back home. Their homes were in Mexico, and they could go back and forth. Once we got rid of the Bracero program in 1968, it created an atmosphere where the only way to get into the country was illegally, and so they tromped across my ranch and
everybody else's
ranch, and but everything has been illegal, and so it's so costly to go back and forth. Grandma gets ill, she dies without her grandsons going to see her because they can't afford to go down and get back.